Welcome back. Our special coverage on a day when Sushma Swaraj has spoken at the UNGA and responded to Pakistan and given what many believe is a befitting reply. The general consensus is that Sushma Swaraj deserves at least an 8 on 10 for a speech that was hard on facts, there was less rhetoric, and it was clearly designed to send out a firm message to Pakistan and also show India as a global power. I want to bring in the Congress party to get an opposition reaction at the moment, because in the past the Congress has been critical of Mr. Modi's Pakistan strategy. Sanjay Jha of the Congress joining me. You would acknowledge, Sanjay Jha, that Sushma Swaraj today pressed all the right buttons. I hope for once we have consensus.
No, Rajdeep, let's be brutally honest here. This was again the same old hollow rhetoric that we've been hearing for the last several days post the Uri attack. I think let's establish the hard reality that this government always had a very confused policy as far as Pakistan was concerned, and tragically enough, even today, despite some very, very hard lessons, we have lost 19 lives of our soldiers. It continues to have absolute lack of a coherent policy in Pakistan. Now, I'll give you a couple of instances.
Mr. Jha, for a moment, Mr. Jha, can you tell me specifically what would the Congress party have said, or your foreign minister have said at the United Nations General Assembly that Sushma Swaraj did not? I mean, let's be clear. If you are going to say that Sushma Swaraj perhaps didn't address the real issues as you're calling them, what is that one issue that the Congress party would have raised that you believe Sushma did not?
Okay, let me raise one. A very, very explicit issue that should not have been ignored by the External Affairs Minister today in the United Nations. Rajdeep, you have been following Mr. Modi and the international politics for a long time. Why is it that the Prime Minister of India refuses to name Pakistan despite the attacks in Pathankot, Udhampur, Pampore, and even as late as Uri? Why? Why is it that the External Affairs Minister refuses to take a position on Pakistan in an international format? Nawaz Sharif went and repeated Kashmir repeatedly. In fact, he possibly took 70% of his time in the UN speech of his talking about Kashmir. He was trying to establish Pakistan's
Sushma Swaraj very specifically, Mr. Jha, I don't know if you heard the speech.
We are aware of
Sushma Swaraj very specifically said that Kashmir is an integral part of India. And she very specifically said, in the context of Pakistan, in that context, naming Mr. Nawaz Sharif, in the context of naming him, those who live in glass houses should not be throwing stones. So I don't know which speech you are talking about when you say that India did not refer to Kashmir. Let me be very clear and fair to Ms. Swaraj.
Rajdeep, the point I'm trying to make is, over the last several weeks, what have we been hearing? We have been hearing that Pakistan is responsible for the attack that happened at Uri, and several attacks, Gurdaspur, all of them put together. The question that we are asking of the government is, why is the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, why did Sushma Swaraj at the United Nations, an excellent platform to call Pakistan the sponsor of terror, actually as a terror-stricken state that is exporting it, particularly to harm India? Why was this position not made in a more unambiguous way? This had to be done in a very categorical manner. I don't think there is any dispute on that in our country.
Mr.
And the point that the Congress party is raising, that this had to be brought forth in a more aggressive manner.
You're questioning the aggression. You're now questioning form. You're not first
10 heads for one.
You're questioning form and saying she was not aggressive enough. Do you go by that?
I think she was very sophisticated. She said everything she needed to say without going into name calling. It was a very sophisticated approach.
I thought it was a very mature approach.
Because there are two ways to look at it. I mentioned before the break Ram Madhav saying jaw for a tooth. You don't believe that really works at a forum like the UNGA. At the UNGA, you are in the global community of nations. You've got to take a slightly higher moral stand, which she perhaps did.
No, and you're not going to show that you're rattled by Pakistan. I mean, India is a major power. Here's someone who's trying to needle them, constantly do whatever it is. We know how to deal with them. We have said that in bilateral forum. We're willing to take it on. In this particular thing, this is the United Nations. We are saying we want an entry into the United Nations Security Council. We want to be a member of the NSG. We are showing that we are responsible power, willing to play by international rules, wanting the international fora to take action against Pakistan. Why would we reduce it to a rant that Prime Minister Sharif reduced his speech to at the UN?
You know, that Ajay Shukla, there will be, I come back to it, those who want more aggression. Now, aggression in diplomatic terms, you've got a Gurmeet Kanwal who said that we must target the posts through which Pakistani infiltrators come on the LOC. There are those who would want even more and even talk about crossing the LOC at times. Do you believe that the time in the last few days, the BJP and the Modi government has tried in some ways to temper those expectations and pointed out the difference between being in the opposition and being in the government? There's a maturity that seems to have come both with what the Prime Minister said in Kozhikode and with Sushma Swaraj today at the UN.
Well, Rajdeep, that maturity has come from having to actually tackle a crisis and having to actually evaluate the options available to the government. I can assure you that the government did evaluate what Gurmeet Kanwal said, the armed military response and the various gradations of armed military response. And they arrived at the conclusion that some of these were perhaps best not done at this point in time, because Pakistan too has a capability to respond, and escalation can take on a life of its own, and a relatively modest crisis can escalate into a much larger one. So the government, and Mr. Modi in particular, is coming to terms with the reality of exercising power, and that is what is tempering some of the reactions that you're actually seeing playing out in the wake of the UD attack. But as far as the aggression in Ms. Swaraj's speech is concerned, I thought she was pretty aggressive. I thought the way that she went after Pakistan, the way she said people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, the way she said if you think you can snatch Kashmir from us, quit dreaming, that's not going to happen. By the standards of television debate, that's relatively restrained. But by the standards of the UNGA, the General Assembly in the United Nations in New York, that's pretty tough talk. So I thought that she hit the right notes, and I would not want her to go any further than that. This is a diplomatic forum.
You know, I'm just wondering here, and there is a point in what you say that maybe we are so used to people shrieking and shouting in television debates that we expect our leaders, when they go to the UNGA, to respond to Pakistan with that muh tod jawab language as well. You don't need to do that, right, Raj? Certainly not in a forum like the UNGA.
Absolutely. I think the idea is that I think Ajay was right. The government evaluated all the options. What Gurmeet Kanwal was saying is important, that we do need to have some sort of military response, graded of course, and the danger of having it escalated and blowing up into a major sort of conflagration, which we don't want to do at the moment. I think Prime Minister has evaluated it correctly, looked at, look, we have a problem with Kashmir. We need to get normalcy to that, which he talked in his Mann Ki Baat yesterday. We have to also look at, evaluate covert options. We don't want to be like Pakistan, and then when we are in an international, we don't want to internationalize the issue to the point that they keep retaliating, we retaliate, we keep escalating it, because as you said, they have the capabilities to do that as well.
Gurmeet Kanwal wants to respond, and then I'll get you in, Veena. You want to respond to that? There's a general feeling that the message that is being sent out, Gurmeet Kanwal, is a more nuanced message. It's a message that is focusing at the moment on the diplomatic isolation of Pakistan. It's not about some would describe as a knee-jerk military response that could easily escalate out of control. Are you willing to accept that as a former army man, that there is a sense that politics demands a more nuanced response in the present scenario?
Certainly, Rajdeep. The DGMO said that we will respond at a place and time of our choosing.
Yes.
I think that says enough, and we need not go into the mechanics of response to Uri as such. But I was talking of a larger multi-pronged strategy. You had raised the issue of strategy before the break. We normally follow in strategy an ends, ways and means approach. We should be clear about the end we want to achieve, and here it is a counter proxy war strategy. We want the proxy war to end on our terms. Then we should be clear about the ways that are available to achieve those ends, and then the means in each of those ways. So I was talking of a larger strategy, a response to whenever there is an act of terrorism on our soil, in which the ISI and the army are involved, Pakistan Army, there should be punishment inflicted on them to raise the cost and eventually make it prohibitive. So mine was a larger strategy. There are diplomatic means, economic means, military means, and political means, and all the others put together.
We're getting more flashes on what India intends to do with the Indus water treaties, because it fascinates me. This is an issue which obviously isn't easy to just in a television studio suggest let's abrogate the Indus water treaty. Again, we are seeing a more nuanced approach, possibly calling off a meeting of the Indus Water Commission. So even diplomatic escalation, is it going to be gradual, you believe? Should it be gradual, or should it be India tomorrow saying we're not attending the SAARC summit, for example, in Islamabad in the first week of November?
No, I think on the SAARC summit we should wait a little bit, and I think it's important though to realize that
keep that door still open. Keep the door still open, you're saying, of the Prime Minister going to Islamabad in the first week of November?
I think no need to comment on it now. I think it may, because I think more important now is to see what Afghanistan said. Look at what Afghanistan is completely with India, and they're willing to speak in the UN. Look at what Bangladesh is saying. So I think this kind of support that we're getting in our neighborhood is very important and very new. Secondly, just look at the dynamics when Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was speaking. You had the US Congress debating a resolution on making Pakistan a terror state. When you had our foreign minister speaking, you had people clapping in support of what she was saying on the issue of terrorism as a global phenomenon, as a phenomenon that's affecting every country, that's affecting India, and calling for the UN to take action against all those countries who are centers of terror. And I think the other point that you have to see, and this is in keeping with what even Gurmeet Kanwal was saying, that there's a huge difference today between what our army can do at the border, the freedom that they've been given by our Prime Minister, by our Defense Minister to take action, to retaliate within the situation as it evolves. As previously under the UPA government, even to fire a shot, you needed permission from Delhi. So I think already there's been a much more realistic diplomatic and military approach to the situation.
KC Singh, former diplomat, also joining me at the moment. KC, we are first rating the speech on a scale of 10. Do you believe that Sushma Swaraj pressed enough buttons for you to give it an 8+, or maybe even a 9 or a 10?
Yes. No, I would say 8+, because it was a balanced speech. She began with the theme which really the UNGA is meeting for, which is sustainable development. And then very shrewdly wove into that the domestic reform agenda of the government, social reform agenda, and said it's 1/6 of humanity. If India is able to achieve the sustainable development goals, then already the world is moving in the right direction. Then she went on to climate change and announced that India will be signing the Paris Accord. So built up all that on the multilateral level, and then came to terrorism, and came not through Pakistan, she came through 26/11, came through the attack in New York, and then the generic problem of terrorism. She brought in terrorism and the need to isolate countries that indulge in it, and then slowly refined it by saying there are countries which allow terrorists to have rallies, to move around freely. Clearly then the picture was relating to Pakistan. Only 2 weak points. I think there's no need to have brought in Haider Ali. Nobody in the UN knows who that is. We caught the man a couple of days ago. It could have been left at Uri. But the other one is, I thought the response in Kashmir was more for the domestic Indian audience than the international audience. Because it's all right to say it's an unbreakable part of India. But as far as the UN is concerned, Nawaz Sharif's charge was that there are Security Council resolutions which UN must implement. I think that should have been addressed, and we should have said, sorry, it is Pakistan itself which has not followed the preconditions laid in Resolution 47 of 1948, and they are the ones who have made demographic changes. So human rights, terrorism is all fine, but a specific answer to the Pakistani demand about Security Council should have put the ball back in the Pakistani court and said, you are the ones who are responsible for the non-implementation. And then you came to Simla and you said you'll settle things bilaterally. So stop raising things which are now way anachronistic. They have no point at all in today's world, because we've changed reality. You've not followed the basic conditions. So that was very weak. I think for the international community, she should have built up that argument. For domestic constituency, it's fine to raise a slogan in the Hall of United Nations. But overall, I would say 8+, very well delivered in Hindi, very well chosen words. I've not seen the English text. It had great flow in it. And she made all the arguments. which needed to be made while retaining balance without making it an India-Pakistan tu-tu meh-meh.
I think that was an important point. It didn't become, she didn't allow it to descend to the level of an India-Pakistan tu-tu meh-meh. Sushma Swaraj clearly, as per all our guests who've joined us so far, an 8+. I need to take a break, even as GVL Narasimha Rao and Shankar Prasad join me. I want to thank Gurmeet Kanwal for joining me, and we will carry forward this debate, because now the challenge is the road ahead. What lies ahead? Ms. Sushma Swaraj has delivered a speech, the Prime Minister has spoken in Kozhikode, but what exactly are India's realistic options as we keep the heat on Pakistan after Uri? Much more ahead in our special focus, and also a look at the day's other top stories.